Ms. Corey, your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Andrew Williams.
Andrew Williams, please. Good afternoon, Mr. Williams. If you'll come all the way to the front here for me, please, sir. And if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath to you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, sir, if you'll come right around here and have a seat for me. And be sure to kind of speak directly into that microphone nice and loudly so everybody can hear you, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Ms. Corey, go right ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. State your name for the record.
Andrew Williams,
In which city and county do you reside?
Jacksonville, Duval County.
In November of 2012, where did you reside?
Jacksonville and Duval County.
What was your occupation at that time?
I was a cabinet installer.
I'm sorry, repeat
A
that.
cabinet installer?
Yes, sir. Were you married at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your wife's name?
Melissa Williams,
And in what specific area, not an address, but in what specific area of town did you live?
Bay Meadows.
And with whom were you living
My
at
wife.
that time? And anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Let me take your attention to Thanksgiving weekend of 2012. Were you in town for that Thanksgiving weekend?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the Friday after Thanksgiving, were you off that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall in the evening hours starting around, let's start around 7 o'clock, what were your plans for that evening?
To take two teenagers that went to our church to their first date, to a movie and dinner.
All right, were you and your wife the chaperones for those teenagers?
Yes, ma'am.
And where did you intend to go to dinner?
I want to say I think we were going to go to the Avenues Mall, I believe, to eat dinner.
And which way would you normally drive from your home to the Avenues Mall?
Bay Meadows to Southside Boulevard, down Southside Boulevard.
And were you and Mrs. Williams in the car at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have the three teenagers with you?
Two. Yes,
Two,
ma'am.
I'm sorry. Where were they sitting?
Backseat.
Okay. And was it your intention to head directly to dinner?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you going to make any stops at that time?
No, ma'am.
And then where would the movies have been after that point?
Tinseltown.
Okay. So you would you have been coming back up Southside Boulevard heading north?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to the time when you got to the intersection of Bay Meadows Road at Southside Boulevard, have you been through that intersection before?
Several times.
Are you very familiar with that intersection?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the Gate gas station, which sits on the northeast corner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you pulled into the Gate gas station before?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At approximately 7:30 or several minutes thereafter, were you near that intersection?
Yes, ma'am.
And in which direction were you traveling on Bay Meadows Road from your
I
home?
think it's west.
Okay.
think, yeah.
And so when you got to the Gate gas station, did you hear or see anything unusual right at that time?
Yes.
All right. No, I'm talking about when you first pulled up.
Oh, no.
All right. Which lane were you in to turn to go to the restaurant?
The second or the first hand left turn lane.
Okay. You would have been heading south then on Southside Boulevard?
Yes, ma'am.
And describe your vehicle.
Blue Honda CRV.
Where were you sitting?
Driver's seat.
Where was your wife sitting?
Passenger seat.
Where were the teenagers?
In the back seat.
Were your windows up or down?
Up.
Describe the weather conditions.
Dark, and I believe it was a bit chilly.
Okay. Was it raining at all?
Not that I remember.
Was
but-
there any thunder or any other weather noise to obstruct your hearing?
Not that I remember, no, ma'am.
Okay. Describe the flow of traffic at that intersection. Have you been through that intersection at various times?
Yes, ma'am.
And does the traffic flow vary with different times of the day?
Yes, ma'am.
On this particular holiday, or this particular afternoon on a Friday evening, what was it like?
Dead. Nothing going on.
Okay. Outside of normal traffic noise, was there any other loud noise, such as a car alarm, a store alarm, or anything else while you were at that intersection?
No, ma'am.
Were you the first car waiting to turn left on that inside lane?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the noise level inside of your own car?
Talking, just conversation between me and the teenagers.
What did you hear while you were at that red light?
noises. Sounded like one of the teenagers actually said, "Is that fireworks?" And I was like, "No, that's gunfire."
You called it gunfire.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you recognize it as such when you heard it?
Yes, ma'am.
How many shots did you hear fired?
Several, more than 5, less than 10.
Okay. And what did you do when you heard those shots?
Turned around.
And how did you make that turn?
I made a left-hand turn like as if I was going to be going towards the Avenues Mall, and made a U-turn to go back up Southside Boulevard.
On your monitor, the state will show you State's Exhibit 3 in evidence. And I want to ask you, sir, is that a picture that you can use to show the jurors where you were?
Yeah.
All right, if you touch that screen, a mark should come up. And can you just show them approximately where you were at the intersection?
Right there.
Okay. And go ahead and draw the U-turn that you did. And then what did you do after that to get into the Gate gas station?
Draw it.
You can draw it, yes. How did you know the shots had come from that direction?
Just heard it. It sounded like it'd come from that direction.
Okay. Why did you go back to the Gate gas station?
I don't know. Something inside me told me to go.
All right. Were you going to try to help if you were needed?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you pull in at the Gate gas station?
I pulled into the first gas pump to the left in the gas station.
All right. Can you just show the jurors, just touch that photo as to where you first pulled in? Was it dark outside? Was it
Yeah.
nighttime?
Yes.
Were the Gate gas station lights on?
Yes, ma'am.
Was it fairly well lit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you pulled in, where did you specifically park your car?
Right there where that dot is, there's a pump right under it. I don't remember what pump it was or anything.
Sir, did you see anything obvious that could be connected to the shooting when you stopped your car?
When I was pulling in, a car was pulling out pretty quickly.
All right. Describe that car.
It was a small car. I don't know exactly the make or model or color. I wasn't really paying attention to it. Just kind of pulled out very quickly, and I pulled in.
All right. Did you ever see that car again that evening?
No, ma'am.
All right. Then after that, what took your attention to anything else going on at the Gate gas station?
There was a red vehicle, a SUV, backing up from the vicinity of the other shops, pulled into a spot in front of the gas station, and there was a young man that got out and was very upset.
All right. First, let me ask you to show the jurors what you mean by the vicinity of the other shops. Point to that and then draw an arrow. Okay. And in which direction did the car, you say it was in reverse, backing up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and where did it back to?
Parking spot right there.
All right. And were you out of your vehicle at this time?
No, I was in my vehicle. I just put it into park, and I saw it backing up.
All right. What did you see next?
I pulled in forwards into the parking spot. Young man got out, very
Do you
upset.
recall which side of the car the young man got out?
I believe it was the driver.
Did you see any type of weapon in that young man's hand at all?
No,
Did you see any weapons coming out of that vehicle being thrown anywhere?
no.
Did you have a clear view of the driver when he got out of the red vehicle?
His side, no. I mean, I saw the door open and I saw his head, but I was on the opposite side of the vehicle.
Did you see him make any throwing throwing gestures towards the bushes near his vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Did you hear or see the other occupants of the vehicle at that particular time?
I heard them.
What did you hear?
Upsetness. One of the young men was yelling, "He's not moving."
I'm sorry, you're going to need to speak up. I don't know if it's the microphone. I'm having a hard time. Just go ahead. What
One
did
of-
you hear him say next?
one
Or
of
what
the-
did you hear the young man say?
One of the young men was saying, "He's not moving."
He's not moving.
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
you know at that point in time to whom they were referring?
No.
What did you do then?
Walked up to the car to see what was going on.
All right. Did you have any concerns at all that someone inside that car was going to hurt you?
No.
What happened?
I pulled up to the car. There was a young man that had been hit. I checked for a pulse. There was another young man that was crying, saying he wasn't moving. And
Can you describe in a little more detail how the young man who you said wasn't moving, where was he in relation to the other young man, and in which seat in the car were they?
I believe it was the passenger side, or the driver's side rear, and the young man was holding him and just saying he's not moving.
Rear seat.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the driver's side, did
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know the young man that was sitting there?
No, ma'am.
And where was the other young man in relation to that young man?
The passenger side.
Okay, was he sitting upright?
Yes, ma'am.
The person on the passenger side?
They were just kind of together. I don't know if he was straight up.
Humped together?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do at that point?
I checked for a pulse. I didn't feel one. I looked over my shoulder and there was an officer that had pulled up.
Okay. Were you coming in through the driver's side of the vehicle to try to give aid?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your training that made you believe you could give at least some aid, initial aid?
I was a junior lifeguard growing up and just done different things. I was actually at the time looking into doing EMT, and so
Short of basic CPR, did you know any other life-saving techniques?
other than, put pressure on it, no, ma'am.
Okay. Now, did you help try to render any further aid to the young man that was not moving?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you do that?
I went up to the officer that had pulled on the scene. I asked for gloves so I could assess the situation. Walked over, again, felt for a pulse, didn't feel one. Asked the officer to come over and help me pull him out to where he could get him on the ground to start CPR or to start trying to put pressure on the wounds until the paramedics got there.
All right. Where the paramedics were not there yet, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
And did that officer assist you?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you attempt some sort of life-saving efforts while that young man was on the ground?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you know that young man?
No, ma'am.
Did you know any of the young man in that red vehicle? Any
No,
of the
ma'am.
young men in that red vehicle?
No, ma'am.
All right. Did you know the officer who pulled up?
No, ma'am.
And at what point did Jack's Fire and Rescue arrive?
After we pulled him out, probably about maybe 5 minutes.
Is that your estimate of the
Yes,
time?
ma'am. I'm not positive the exact time.
Did you ever see any signs of life in the young man that you had pulled out of that red car?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever hear him utter anything?
No, ma'am.
Could you tell whether or not he was even breathing when you and the officer pulled him out of the car?
He had no pulse and he was not. It did not look like he was breathing.
Okay. And the other young man who was in the back seat with him, did you know his name?
No, ma'am.
And what did he do when you all pulled the gentleman out of the car? What did that other young man do?
He just kind of stood to the side and watched.
What was his demeanor at that time?
Very shook up.
I'm sorry?
Very shook up.
Did you see any tears on any of those young men?
Yes, ma'am.
Ever hear them express any anger towards anyone, much less the person who had shot their friend?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever hear them use any curse words towards anyone?
Not that I recall.
Did you hear any curse words towards the shooter?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever even know who the shooter was at that time?
No, ma'am.
We're going to show you one last picture, which is in evidence as State's Exhibit 8, and I would just like for you to show the jurors, ignore the tag inset, that's a composite exhibit for later, but does this picture sort of depict where the car was when you walked up to it?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall if the driver's doors were open or closed?
As I said, I think when the driver door opened when he got out.
All right, and can you show the jurors the area where you and the officer laid this young man on the ground? All right. Did you leave anything of your own there at the scene?
No, ma'am.
Once rescue arrived, did you back away and let them and law enforcement take over the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you stay at the gas station to tell police just what you knew of what
Yes, ma'am.
happened? Now, sir,
You were a junior lifeguard at 16 years old, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How
Sir.
old are you today?
I'm 22.
And how old were you in 2012 when this happened?
21.
Okay. So from 16 to 21, any other CPR, life-saving, any type of medical training at all other than at 16 to be a junior
ma'am.
lifeguard?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you're giving CPR to Mr. Jordan Davis, are you focused on what you're doing?
Very much so.
You would agree that this was a very traumatic event for you because this is the first time you ever gave CPR, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But you're telling this jury that as you're giving Jordan Davis CPR, you're watching what other people are doing around you?
I can pay attention, yeah.
Okay. And again, you have no medical training, correct?
No, sir.
No law enforcement training?
No, sir.
No first responder training?
No, sir.
The only thing you've testified today is you were thinking about a career at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you pursued that career? Are you an EMT right now?
Nope.
Have you taken any type of medical training or law enforcement as of today?
No.
Okay. Isn't it true you used to own a firearm
Yes.
and you got rid of that firearm?
Objection, outside the scope.
Sustained.
Mr. Williams, it took you about 1.5 to 2 minutes before that light turned green, made a U-turn, went all the way down the street, another U-turn and pulled in, correct?
How long did you say?
About 1.5, 2 minutes, is that fair?
Probably.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you think that's a fair representation of your time?
I didn't have a stop clock on me. I don't know. It just, I mean, it's probably about a minute to turn around and everything. The light was green.
Okay. And at that point, you waited a minute for it to turn green, correct?
No, it had turned green when we heard the gunshots, and that's when I made the U-turn.
All right, and then you went all the way down, made another U-turn and came in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You testified that you saw a car leaving the parking lot, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you have no idea whose car that is, correct?
No, sir.
Is it a possibility that could have been somebody else also leaving the gas station after shots were fired?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not here to testify that that was Mr. Dunn's vehicle, correct?
I don't know whose vehicle it was.
All right, so the relevance is almost nothing because you're not sure who it is, correct?
I don't know whose vehicle it was, yeah.
Now, you're on scene for about another minute before that SUV backs up, correct?
No, it was backing up as I was pulling into my parking spot.
Okay, and can you tell me what the people did in the SUV when it was in the other parking lot?
Nothing. They
You
were
didn't see
backing
it?
up.
Right, well, you didn't even see it stop, correct?
It was in backing up motion.
Right, so when you saw it, it was already backing up, correct?
Correct.
And how close to the gate parking lot was it when you saw it?
I mean, probably 40 to 60 feet.
Okay, and that's from the parking lot, correct? You have to say it out loud.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, the picture you just saw with the state's evidence, you're talking about 40 to 60 feet from where that red Durango parked, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, how many first responders, meaning law enforcement officers, were on scene when you got there?
When I got there, I believe one police officer was pulling in.
Okay, so you pull in the same time as law enforcement, correct?
No, I'm sorry. When I was sitting there and saw the car pull in, an officer had pulled up.
And because we keep saying the word car a lot, are you talking about when the red Durango pulls in, there's no law enforcement on scene, correct?
Correct. It pulled in. I looked around. Law enforcement officer was pulling on scene.
Okay, and you saw, I believe you said you saw the back window shot out, is that correct?
I believe the back was shot, yeah,
Okay, and that's just based on your recollection today?
if I remember, yeah.
Okay, and would you agree, was this a very traumatic experience for you? Have you ever been involved in anything like this before?
Not to this grade, no.
Okay, and you have no training to deal with anything like this, is that correct?
No.
Now, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, did I hear you asked law enforcement first responders for a pair of gloves?
I asked the officer for gloves, yes.
Okay, and, well, would you agree that officers are first responders and trained in first response techniques?
I would guess that they have CPR training, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that. I mean, I would assume it.
Okay. And by the time you asked for those gloves, how many officers were on scene?
One.
Just the one? Okay. And is that, let me ask you this, when you checked for his pulse, do you have any type of medical training to check for a pulse?
From CPR?
And that's when you were 16? Mm-hmm. Okay. And at that point, you then asked the officer to help you get Mr. Davis out of the vehicle?
Yes.
Still only one officer on scene?
At that time, other officers had come on scene.
All right. And
I don't
you asked-
remember how many.
Okay. And at that point, you asked them, is that correct?
There was one officer on scene when I asked for gloves.
Yes.
When I got gloves, I went over, checked for a pulse again. I went back to an officer and said, hey, there's no pulse. He's not moving. We probably need to go ahead and pull him out and try to see if he's okay.
Now, did you tell these officers, the only medical training I have is when I was 16 as a junior lifeguard?
No.
Did they ask you?
No.
They just handed you a pair of gloves and said, okay, go ahead and do it.
I said I'd like to check on the young man in there, and they said okay.
All right. And then when you asked them to help you pull them out, at that point, did they ask you for any type of medical training that you had?
No.
They just agreed, okay, we'll help you pull them out.
Yes.
Now, since this has happened, have you seen anything about this on TV?
Not really. I do my best to kind of not do much attention to it.
Okay, even when it first happened?
I remember my wife telling me that something had come on.
And do you recall going on Facebook to seek out the Davis family?
Yes.
Okay, and you did that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and matter of fact, when you went to the memorial, you sought out Tevin Thompson and Leland Brunson, correct?
Yes.
And I believe, if I recall, you said Tommy Storms was not there?
I don't remember if he was or not. I don't remember. I didn't personally see him. Like, I didn't personally talk to him or interact with him that I recall.
Would you have recognized him if you did see him?
Oh, I would have recognized him if I, like, I mean, I don't know if he could have been somewhere else, but
Okay. And again, when you're asking for gloves, checking a pulse, pulling Mr. Davis out of the car, and administering CPR, are you telling this jury that you were still cognizant of where everybody was outside of that gate gas station?
I had a pretty decent idea. I was kind of looking around because I was hoping that rescue would show up soon.
All right. And you said rescue took about 5 minutes?
Right about that, yeah.
All right. Nothing further, Judge.
Very
Ms. Court?
briefly.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Williams, is it particularly complicated to feel for someone's pulse?
No, ma'am.
And did you do that through the young man's wrist?
No, ma'am. I did it through his neck.
Through his neck? Did you
Yes,
ever
ma'am.
feel for a pulse on his, did you ever find any evidence of a pulse on his neck?
No.
And were you there just to help?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
May he be excused?
He may.
Mr. Stroll?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you being here. State's next witness.